Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Andy Dominguez. I'm going to be presenting to you guys Appendix A. Appendix A does consist of a few templates and tools that are great takeaways for school counselors to use. So first, it's going to be a guidance curriculum action plan, an intentional guidance action plan, and a needs assessment survey. So we're going to be exploring what those are and why they're so benefit for us to be using as school counselors. So, as I said earlier, they're tools and templates for data-driven counseling. It helps us as counselors plan, deliver, and evaluate services in an organized way. And plus, they're resources that are already designed for us, so we can, take them away and use them the next day if we have an intervention that we need to plan for, or any group, or any lesson, right? And of course, it does align with the Ask a National model because it does emphasize the need for action plans. So this is really right up our alley as school counselors to be using an organized way and an action plan to be implementing effective interventions and ways to support students. So first up is the Guidance Curriculum Action Plan. It's a Tier 1 service, so this is all students. So it's a structured way for school counselors to plan, implement, and evaluate guidance lessons in a measurable data-driven way, right? So it's very standards and competency-driven, and it uses a developmental approach. So what that means is that the standards are aligned with the ASCA national standards, of course, and they're competency-driven. And when you're planning out these lessons, you're taking account of the developmental age of the students and how they're transitioning from other elementary, middle, and high school. So you're really being intentional with the audience and understanding how they're going to digest the information. So I created this diagram to go over how it's organized and how it's measured. So over here on the left, it's saying how is it organized. Of course, in the template, when you read over the appendix, it shows a few examples. But I just want to discuss the intention behind the guidance curriculum action plan because this is the whole point of us being able to use a format that's already there for us and that's organized and that is there for a reason. So, of course, the grade level, for example, all ninth graders are receiving a transition welcome to high school lesson, or maybe a better one would be a fifth grader is receiving a transition lesson, or an eighth grade is receiving a transition lesson to high school. So that's a great lesson topic and content area to focus on. And then, of course, the third bullet point is ask a national standards. And the fourth is curriculum and materials, just so that you're taking into account of what you're going to need and really paying attention and being intentional with that. Of course, the timeline. So, what time frame, what part, or what month are you going to be doing this? Like for transition, let's say, would it be better to do it in May, or would it be better to do it in the month before May? Like, what's going to be more impactful? So, really taking the time and being intentional with that. Of course, projected number of students impacted, that's just an informational box that you can fill in. And then the period and time of the lesson. So, really taking into account of the students so that you're not taking away their instructional minutes or that you're being considerate for both the teachers and the students at time. And then how is it measured? So it's measured by evaluation methods. That's the perception data and results data. Of course, there's more information on page 41 where chapter 3 that dives into that if you really want to know more. But perception data is our pre and post test, really helping or really understanding how the students are perceiving the lesson or the intervention being addressed or being taught or being explored. So how they're perceiving it, like how are they understanding the skills that are being addressed, or anything that they have that they're perceiving, right? And then results data, that's the long-term goals, the measurable outcome goals, the numbers that we want to share with admin because that's going to make impact, suspension rates or behavioral rates, or maybe incident reports that we can go ahead and pull up. That's more of a measurable, bigger outcome goal, like the bigger picture. So, this plan ensures that lessons are intentional and that they are measurable. So the intent is taking the time and consideration of filling it all out organized. So I created a scenario situation here with counseling without and with guidance curriculum action plan. So over here on the left is an action plan without an action plan, a scenario. So as it reads, a counselor decides to do a lesson on respect after hearing about many incidents on the playground. The counselor gives a lesson to only one class who had the time, does no pre and post measurement, and has no follow-up plan. So unfortunately, scenario one is a scenario that did happen in my internship last semester a few times, where the counselor did an intervention or he did a lesson because the incidents were reported either by a teacher or by the vice principal, having us to go ahead and address it. So we would address it that day as if we're putting out fires. So, as it says, more so the counselor would pull the student out of the river instead of going up the stream and figuring out why the student is there in the first place. So, unfortunately, that has been my experience in the elementary level a lot because of my past internship. So, learning about the action plan more is really important, as scenario 2 reads: a counselor implements a respect lesson for all third graders using the guidance curriculum action plan. So if you notice, it's addressing all third graders because it's a tier 1 service, so all third graders deserve that service. And they align the lesson with ASCA standard PS826, which is in the national standards for students. I'll be sharing the link for that in the resources page at the end of the slide. And that's just using effective communication skills. So there it is, competency driven, and referring to ASCA standards. They collect ASCA survey data before and after, so you're understanding how the students are perceiving the lesson and intervention. So, and they review discipline referrals for respect-related issues, and now have implementation to show admin. So now you have something to show admin in numbers, in format, and in planning. So not only is the guidance curriculum action plan a great way and tool to organize your approaches and your lessons, but it's a great advocacy tool because to avoid principals going up to you and telling you to see these students or address this need right here and then or this week, you can go ahead and set yourself up for a better timing and impactful approach by using an action plan, right? So if you already establish this norm that you have a format and you have a plan and you have a way of addressing the needs in a specific way that align with your counselor standards, then it's going to be a more timely manner and a more effective approach instead of putting out fires all the time. So that's why you can use it as an advocacy tool with administration. Now the second one is the intentional guidance action plan. So this is more so the intentional targeted practice. So it's applied by identifying a targeted need, selecting intentional interventions, then tracking results to ensure the plan supports student growth and outcome goals. So for example, a school counselor may create an intentional guidance action plan for students failing 2 or more classes. So I believe this was an example shared in the appendix, so one of the templates shared that. So it's just a more intentional action, and it's more remedial than preventative, but it helps support students in a certain subgroup. So we'll go more into detail about what it is. So I mapped this up as well. So it's similar to the format and how it's organized for the curriculum guidance action plan, but it's a little different. So of course it addresses the ASCA standards, but what's new is what type of service is being addressed. So since it's a subgroup, this subgroup or group is going to be needing more support, right? Because since it's intentional targeted practice, these students aren't receiving what they need from a tier 1 service, so they need a little bit more support. So whether that's group counseling, parent meetings, and check-in, check-out, this format and this action plan is going to help you implement multiple services that align with each other. Because let's say a group counseling is not only going to be the only service that the students need and the support, they might need a check-in and check-out or something that aligns with that, or supporting them in multiple ways, but noting that in your action plan that how this is going to impact them as well. And of course resources needed, just to be account of and aware about what resources support you're going to need, whether that's curriculum or a classroom or when you're going to be able to have that space and just overall support. Of course, the timeline, starting and ending date for the services that you're doing, and the number of students impacted. And then, of course, how is it measured? It's measured in the same way the evaluation methods, the perception data, the results data, But the perception data looks a little different because it's going to be a little bit more targeted, like group counseling, since it is Tier 2 services. Like our pre and post assessments in the Tier 1 service, we use the pre and post. But for example, like if we're going to be doing a small group, like for me, when I did my group in elementary, I did exit tickets and self-assessments so that I was aware of like what the students were learning, so that how they felt after each group and what they were reflecting on, just so I know that they were really taking and digesting the information and the group process that was going on and just reflecting on it. So those are great ways to understand and pull out data points about how they're perceiving the groups and the interventions, and then of course the results data, what we want to look at and what we want to share with admin, and the bigger goal, right? So jumping into the scenario situation on the left without an action plan. This one is, okay, so the principal asks the counselor to speak at the batch of students who frequently have conflicts. The counselor informally meets with the students to support them. The counselor speaks with them about their feelings, no clear structure, no data collected, right? So the principal's asking, hey, can you go ahead and talk to the student and a few other students about the situations that have been going on. It's been a little bit frequently, so I'm a little worried and there's something going on. Can you go ahead and talk to them? So, typically a counselor will go there and talk to them, but, just ask about how they're feeling, what's going on, maybe get a little tracked, but not really have the data point about what's being addressed. You're just kind of like just talking to them, right? And then the counselor speaks about their feelings, no clear structure, right? So you can't really collect data in that way if you're just going to be putting out the fire and just adhering to the admin's needs too. So in scenario 2, the counselor creates a 4-week small group on conflict resolution using an intentional guidance action plan template. They align the plan with ASCA personal and social standards, of course, and they intentionally pick students for the group. So this is what I put this, that they intentionally pick students for the group, because when you're making a group, it's really important to consider and be intentional about who you're putting in that group. So, as I learned in ASCA, you don't want to do a deficit group, because they all will feel a certain type of way and understand that they're in a group for that certain reason, and maybe putting a group and maybe intentionally putting another student in that group where they can learn from one another, or where they all have certain strengths and that they can, tie that into how they can learn and trust the group process. So they use exit tickets and role plays for perception data as a counselor. Exit tickets, as we discussed earlier in my experience, or using self-assessments. And then the counselor tracks reduction in discipline referrals as a result to data to show admin. So of course this is a really important piece where that you at least can, create a plan, an action plan, and get data from it, rather than just addressing the need that the principal wants you to and just speaking with them, right? You can't really get much of a data point from that. So those are the 2 scenarios. And then last but not least, a needs assessment survey. So just real quickly, it's a needs assessment survey collects students and stakeholders' input to guide counseling priorities and supplement planning data. So it's that extra piece of information that you need from stakeholders or students to really help you design your curriculum. Like for example, right now I'm doing a group and I sent out a needs assessment because I really want to understand like what they want to get out from that group and what norms that they expect and what makes them feel comfortable, so that you're really having them have that input. Because if you think about it, if you're going to be doing an intervention and you're not thinking about what the students' needs are and you're just assuming that this is what they need, how are they going to engage or connect with the group or that intervention, right? So when you're applying it, you're gathering input from students and stakeholders, you're identifying the most important skills and supports from 3 domains, and you're using results of that survey to guide curriculum, small groups, interventions, etc., any intervention that you're going to be applying. So it can be anything that is a Tier 2 or Tier 1 service as well. The takeaway is that insurance programs are data-driven, of course, and not assumption-driven, as I mentioned. It helps counselors justify services to admin with evidence, of course, that's important, and it gives students voice in shaping counseling priorities. So you're really understanding what the students want, because at the end of the day, we're there for the students, and if we are assuming what they need, then that's not the right approach. We want to understand like where their head is and meet them in the middle. And then, so this is the resource tab. This is Hatching Results. This website that I linked on the Hatching Results word is a link to a whole bunch of sources that's really useful. And then the Tier 1 and Tier 2 is the Guidance Action Plan and the Intentional Guidance Action Plan that's similar. It's a really good resource that you can just plug in and use and try implementing in your daily practices. And then the Ask a National Standards right here is the one that I was addressing in the action plan of the standards that you're going to be aligning the lesson or the topic or the intervention to. And then these are my references. But thank you guys for listening. I really hope that you guys are going to be taking away these tools and really practicing on implementing them as a norm when you're addressing the needs and support systems for students. But yeah, thank you.